Hello, everyone. My name is Kamran Akbarzadeh, CEO of Project Control Academy, and I'm here with another LinkedIn Live session that we have for you every other week. So today is one of those sessions. Please use the comment box below this video and introduce yourself and let us know who you are and where you are from. So today the session is a little bit different because I have a guest that is not only expert in project controls and he's a project controls executive, but also he has overcome a big challenge and that we will talk about that. As you know, the title is From Project Controls to Cancer Championship. And so you know the challenge is cancer, and our guest is going to share with you the lessons learned, how project controls has helped him, and how he overcame the cancer and became a cancer champion. So again, please introduce yourself in the chat or in the comment area, and throughout our conversation, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and it will show in the chat here on our platform, and I will read that and ask the question from our guest. So let me now introduce to you our guest, Gregory Proctor. He's a project controls executive and a cancer champion. We are blessed to have him with us today. I'm not going to go to any details about his introduction. I want to ask him to introduce himself, about how he grew his career in project controls, and then we take it from there with other questions related to cancer and the lessons learned. So, hi, Gregory, how are you? Thank you very much for joining this session. Please introduce yourself and let us know how you became who you are today, especially with the project controls area. We start from there.
Sure. Certainly. Thank you, Cameron and Project Controls Academy for inviting me onto your program. I followed you guys and certainly been a big, huge supporter and advocate for what you guys do. So, I appreciate it and thank you very much for having me on the program. So to kind of jump right into answering your question, for me, I've launched 2 successful global organizations based on the aspect of providing what I consider to be a full spectrum of project controls lifecycle consulting. And so I have always been a trailblazer, kind of a business transformation individual who fosters organizations' resiliency and has an uncanny ability to basically anticipate change and the challenges that go on with projects. So my span has basically crossed the globe from startups to high growth to turnaround type enterprises, dealing with diversity across all vertical spectrums. I have a passion in building what I consider to be multinational or multicultural teams where I can basically empower, engage, and offer transparency with a high-end ethics and results and overall resiliency in bringing forth projects full circle and bringing forth a complete variation and return on their ROI.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much for sharing that, Gregory. Now, tell us about the career start, how you started, how you grew your career, and what has project controls taught you?
Wow. My career started probably some 26, 25 years ago. And I don't know who's online, and certainly the individual that pretty much got me into project controls has always been a mentor, pretty much kind of like a father figure to me, pretty much a champion for everything that I've done throughout my career. And coincidentally, I started out in project controls in the semiconductor industry, where basically, if anybody knows anything about the semiconductor industry, it is development of computer chips, and it's very high tech. It's completely intrinsic on the technical and engineering capability. So plans and schedules and costs are at the highest level because, everybody's looking for that return on their investment. I have been in project controls, like I said, for a little bit over 26 years, and I've enjoyed it. And certainly it has offered me a multitude of things, which we'll talk about even further throughout my career.
Very good. Now, let's just jump into the diagnosis. Now, you've been in project controls for years, and something happened in 2021. Tell us about that, how you found out, how you were diagnosed, and how did you feel when you realized that you have cancer?
Wow, you know, I tend to get this question quite a bit with all the other interviews, and you know, I think every time I get drawn back into what was that moment like for me? What was transcending in my mind? You know, what were the feelings and emotions? And I think in a lot of cases, you know, people look at me and they value my vulnerability. They value my authenticity of being able to just kind of, as I say, put it out there. You know, leave it in the fairway. And I'll have to say, at the time that I was diagnosed, it was an out of mind, out of body experience. I mean, you're shocked in the aspect of hearing the words cancer. As we all know, cancer provides such a dark cloud, you know, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, that basically goes on throughout your mind. And at the time, I just realized, you know, how was I going to deal with this? And I'm going to be very transparent with you, Cameron, because, you know, initially getting that information and having the shock factor, you know, I'm not afraid to say, as a man, particularly as a black man, that I broke down in tears, man. I was literally crying. I mean, I cried for days on end because I was alone. And a lot of people don't realize the sincerity of, you know, when you hear the words cancer. In my case, I heard the words multiple myeloma. You know, I didn't know what to do. I was uneducated. I was unaware. You know, these were things that I'd never heard of. I mean, you know, you hear the word cancer, but this particular specific type of cancer was something that was unbeknownst to me, very new and just completely out of the box. And so, you know, I really had to process that. And as a part of trying to process that, I had to understand within myself what I needed to bring forth, that I had as skills, that I had as fortitude, emotional stability, to be able to bring myself out of that dark cloud, not only myself, but my wife and my family, to help them understand that we're going to get through this. And it's a difficult thing to put into perspective, but that's exactly where I was at that moment in time.
Very, very good. So, can you tell us about the type of the cancer? You say multiple myeloma. What is it? Because I don't really know much about that. I've seen your post, but I read a little bit book about that. Can you explain to our audience what the cancer is and the difference between that and other types?
Yeah. So for this particular cancer, it forms basically in the white blood cell. It's a part of the plasma inside of your bone marrow. And what typically happens is our white blood cells are what we consider to be, you know, the infection fighters. You know, they fight off viruses, they fight off bacteria. And so with the multiple myeloma, it makes pretty much what they call an M protein, and that protein produces antibodies that are not very good for your body, and they're really cancerous. I mean, that's really the definition of it. And so what it does is it crowds out the white blood cells in your bone marrow and in your plasma, and it basically causes something more harmful than helpful. And so in the case of multiple myeloma, that's basically, keeping it very simple without getting into too many medical terms, that's basically what it is. And it impacts your immune system. It causes bone pain. You know, it leaves you in a very distraught situation in a lot of cases. And for me, just so that the audience that's online completely understands, when I was originally diagnosed, I was having back pain and lower discomfort, and it was causing me very much, you know, a significant discomfort, to where I was starting to become immobile. I couldn't walk. And, you know, during that particular time, I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't figure it out. As I proceeded to the doctors and started to get some of these early checks out of the way, what we realized is that something was there. There was actually a tumor. There was actually a growth that needed to kind of, you know, be identified. And so I went through all these series of tests. And as I went through these series of tests, you know, it's just like with anything else, you know, it's uncertainty, it's the cloud. You know, these things are constantly trying to, weigh heavily on your thinking. And so, once we finally heard what it was, like I said, again, I was alone. No one was here, in San Antonio with me. My wife was out of the country. I'm dealing with all of this news by myself. And like I said, it was a very tragic and kind of tumultuous experience to go through, and very overwhelming.
Wow. So it's been, I haven't experienced anything like that. And I'm sure that those who have maybe someone in their lives that they have seen that firsthand, they know what you mean. But really, when I hear from you, that first shock is really something that takes you to another level of thinking and lots of maybe inner thinking as well. So now let's talk about the process that you went through. So you heard the news, you were alone, and lots of things going on in your head. What was the process before we talk about the role of project controls there?
Well, I think the first process that, anybody that endures that type of news, whether it's cancer or anything, life threatening or trauma type illness, I think the first thing you want to reconcile with is, and I've said this many, many times, and people have kind of heard me go, Greg, what does that mean? And I always say, are you built for this? And the question really is devised based on the fact of, can you endure and weather the storm that you're getting ready to go through? Because if you're not mentally prepared, physically prepared, spiritually prepared, I think you're going to be fighting a battle that you probably will not win, or you may have some success, but you may not have all the success that you want. And so I think right at that very moment for me, I had to challenge myself, just like I do with any other project that I've ever worked on, utilizing my project controls acumens and training and professional skill sets, is I had to challenge myself to understand that regardless of what the challenges are and what I have to endure over the next year, I need to be on the forefront of being proactive, being better than the doctors, having my mind in the right spot, having my spirituality in the right spot, and having people around me that are going to congruently offer me the encouragement and support and unconditional love that I needed to be able to endure the storm that I was about to go through.
Very good, very good. So now let's talk about the role of project controls. So you have had lots of experience. You have a business in project controls and conduct lots of projects. Definitely, we use our skills. Now, in projects, we know project controls means controlling project. Mm-hmm. What did you do? How project controls, your skills, helped you to go through this process and become a cancer champion?
Well, I first have to say, Cameron, that excuse me, it wasn't me in particular that had to utilize those skills. It was my wife, because I'm the patient. I'm already dealing with copious amounts of chemo going through my body, dealing with all of these drugs, dealing with the fact that I can't walk. I'm having to have assistance in everything that I do. As far as meals and it was just a full change, full ensemble for me that, I went from one end of the spectrum of being, very self-sufficient to, okay, here's where I am today, and having to basically digest that and accept the fact that I needed to be humble, at that moment in time, because I was still alive, I was still able to breathe. And so what I had to do in my mind was I had to say to myself, okay, to my lovely wife, Monica, I had to say to her, you have to become the project manager. Mm-hmm. You have to take every aspect of what I know in project management, and you have to manage me, because I am the project now. I am the deliverable. I am, the person that needs the help the most. And so she kind of looked at me, and said, okay, I understand. And so what we ended up doing is we set aside, a program and a strategy that allowed for her to resonate all of the skills of cost, schedule, and scope, utilizing those things and applying those same attributes and principles into dealing with the doctors, into looking at the analytics of all of my labs and looking at all of the statistics of things that were going on with my body, watching my meal intake, understanding and analyzing the scope of work of what we have to do, looking at trend analysis of where I am today as to where I will be in a couple of weeks, understanding that we're on an aggressive timeline to get the cancer in remission within 3.5 to 4 months, which was extremely crazy. It was like going through a suicide mission. But, all of these things had to collide together and come together in a very unison way that allowed for me to be even where I am today, because it's nothing shy of a miracle as to where I stand today in my life, being basically roughly 280 days post my stem cell transplant, which was basically on February the 9th of this year. And so, I've come full circle, and it's been a blessing. It's been, as I say, melodies from heaven rain down on me. But, I'm just grateful at this point in time for all of the people like yourself and friends and family that have continued to follow my journey and continue to offer me that overall continuation of support.
Very good. Very good that you applied, or your wife actually applied the project management skills
Yes.
to the project, and you were the project, as you said. Was there any scope creep? I'm sure that with hospitals and all the things could also delay. Did you experience anything that sometimes you have something to be done on a specific day and it was delayed or it wasn't done?
Well, in the definition of scope creep, as you're trying to fight for your life, it's a difference, in the aspect, or should I say, in the admiration of understanding that, if you miss milestones or if things don't go quite well, it could either be catastrophic or it can cause a tremendous amount of setback. And so I'm going to paint a picture for you just briefly, because, between July of last year up until about October, I was in chemo 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Okay. Now, anybody that understands what these chemicals do to your body and the vortex that you're in, that you have to go through, it's like you're on the best amusement ride in the world. You're sitting in a stationary chair. You're not moving at all. And you got all these drugs going through your body. These drugs are basically bringing you high. They're bringing you low. They're causing you drowsiness. They're causing you nausea. They're causing you all different types of symptoms and side effects and things that are going on with you. Like I said, I dealt with that for 5 days a week from July to October. Now, by the time October rolled around, we were in remission. And what does remission mean? Remission basically means that they were unable to detect any cancer cells in my body at that time. Now, of course, since I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, IgA kappa, P17 deletion put me in a very, very high risk category. So IgA is basically very common, but in the context, since I had IgA kappa combined with P17 deletion, we have 23 chromosomes in our body. So my 17th chromosome was pretty much submutating. It was doing things that, it probably shouldn't be doing, just to kind of put it all in the context. But going back to like October, so here we are, we're in October. As a part of what I was dealing with at that time was the financial toxicity, because I was burning through $22,500 per week just in treatment costs. And then on top of that, trying to figure out, how do we pay for, even with insurance, how do we manage to pay for something that's going to be $1 million for me to go through a transplant? So fighting with my insurance companies, dealing with the doctor's schedules, and of course dealing with COVID, because this was occurring during the COVID pandemic. All of these things just became a very critical juncture in my survivalship and in my ability to recover, because we were constantly moving the pendulum across from one side to the other, literally every single day, trying to balance the needle out. And fortunately enough for me, what ended up happening is I was blessed on December the 10th, being a veteran, by the VA hospital stepping in and basically saying, from this day forward, Greg, we will cover all your bills. Now, as of today, a lot of people talk about, the cliche of, well, how much does it cost? What are the significance of some of the things that you have to endure with cancer? Well, you're looking at a guy that's worth about $2.2 million right now, because that's what it cost me to get to where I am today. Okay. Not talking about any other part of my life, just what I've endured through cancer.
Wow. That really requires a very strong mindset, Gregory. because many can give up, right,
That's
during
correct.
the process. What kept you moving forward? Because I believe you are on a mission, right? So you've been doing project controls for long term, and then this challenge came. But what kept you moving forward from the mindset point of view? What made you stay strong and go through the process and not give up?
Uh, sorry. Um, you know, again, going back into that space, um, for me, it's very, very simple. It's almost like it's like a quote. It's like overlook your fears and start to believe. Because if you trust and believe, even with the mind, it's very powerful to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish in life. And I think the things that really motivated me the most, number one, was the fact that I know that my work and what I set out to do on this earth is not completed. And so I needed a second chance. I needed to be rebooted into Greg 2.0 so that I can continue to offer very impactful, very inspirational, be like a beacon of hope, a beacon of light for those that, obviously are going through some of the same things that I've gone through, or even dealing with challenges, things in their lives that are rough to deal with. So I just sit down and prayed, and I really looked at where I was in my life, and I prioritized and began to understand there was a lot of what I consider to be BS in my life that I needed to get rid of, and there was a lot of things that I needed to focus my life in on, and there was a lot of things I needed to be humbled on that I was not humble on, because having an opportunity to breathe, to see the sunshine rise, to wake up in the mornings and hug your wife, hug your kids, and be able to get out on the trails, some of the simpler things in life, I started to take those things and embrace those as greatness versus looking at those things that I had looked at in the past as not being, so significant in my life. And so when those contributions started to roll in, it was like a breath of fresh air. And I took on those things and basically said to myself that if I survive this, and if I get on the other side and I'm stronger, mentally better, more prepared than what I was as I went into this, my mission in life was going to be able to give back. And that's basically what I'm doing right now, is giving back.
Wow. So I was just listening, I got goosebumps because when you were talking about some of the things that we take for granted, then become more important and they keep us forward, like
That's right.
family, kids, wife, and so on. So very good. A couple of comments from our listeners. Denise Murtha says, it does require such a strong mindset. So amazing. So great journey. And Shore also mentioned that great conversation. Thank you, Gregory. Sonam, the strength within the self matters over everything else to overcome every challenge in life. That really is important, that strength that you develop. So Shore has a question. I just wanted to ask a question from you. What has been your biggest learning turning point after coming out of this challenge? That was actually one of my questions to ask, but maybe you answered the question now. What is the biggest lesson learned that you've had once you kind of recovered and now you are on the journey to full recovery? What is the biggest lesson there?
Well, obviously there's a lot of lessons. If I had to bubble one to the top, I would basically say, for where I was in my life before cancer hit and where I am now, for me, patience. They always say patience is a virtue, but when you have to give up control, when you have to put your hands and your life into someone else's hands, you know, it requires you to look at things with your eyes wide open. It requires you to really be afraid, because these are things outside of the compound of what you know and what your capabilities are. And so for me, I had to learn to be patient. Now there's a lot of other things that I could talk about, but certainly that is one of the ones that, really resonates very well. And significantly, I had to learn to be patient with my wife because, like I said, she became the project manager. I had to trust and be patient with my doctors that I knew what they were doing. I've got a team of 8 doctors. I mean, that's crazy. People go, 8 doctors. Why do you have so many? Well, I've got a transplant specialist. I've got a back specialist. I've got, multiple myeloma specialist. I've got an oncologist. I have my general physician, trying to get all these people all on the same accord, like herding cats, to ensure the betterment of the best quality of life that I can have longevity wise post cancer. That was a pretty hard task. And so, for me, it was patience that I needed to ensure that I instilled in my life because I wasn't in control. My control was not only in the hands of others, but in the power above in the Lord Jesus Christ.
Very good, very good. So patience, that was the number one lesson learned. You mentioned about the 8 doctors and your wife as project manager. So lots of stakeholders, including you, for your wife to deal with, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
I
Very
mean,
good. So now let's talk about life after cancer. How is it now? Are you still active in project controls? What else you are doing that we can talk about?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, at the time that project controls, or excuse me, not at time project controls, let me just rewind just for a second. I apologize. At the time that I was diagnosed, I was on an upward trajectory. So, I had, a mobile app company called TrueSpot that we're in the middle of a capital raise. I was doing a lot of consultancy work through my company called SchXer. A lot of people that follow me knows about my podcast called Cut to the Chase. So all of these things they're just like, like wild stallions on the open prairie. They're just running, things are going really, really, really well. And then, like I said, boom, this cancer, diagnosis hit. And so to answer your question, at this point in time in my life, like I said, I'm kind of going through a transformation phase. I do realize that there are significant things such as project controls and value that project controls has offered in my life that I want to bring forward. But then there's other things that I'm looking at where I can be more impactful. I can be more spiritual. I can be more uplifting. I can be, a value added to people to help change the mindset, to help nourish their souls and bring forth a sense of relevance and compassion and empathy into their lives, unlike what they've experienced when they're going through something like the cancer diagnosis. Which one of the things that I'm working on right now is I'm working very closely with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. For those that don't know, I was selected here in San Antonio as the spokesperson, or what they call the Honored Visionary Hero of the Year, which that campaign will be starting here next year. So I'm excited about that because that's going to offer me exposure to roughly 15 million people here in the 92 counties that I'll be partaking in. And then on top of that, I'm also working with the national campaign on a lot of, what I would consider to be public outreach, so forth and so on, and several other multiple myeloma research foundations that have called upon me not only to share my story, but be a voice of reasoning, be a patient advocate, and those type of things. Now, as far as my business is concerned, as you alluded to, project controls, I'm still doing quite a bit of project controls work as well, but not to the degree that I was before, primarily because, as you know, project controls, it takes a different appetite to really, as I say, expand your game. And I've been there, I've had a lot of success in project controls. I've worked on just about every vertical industry with the exception of what I consider to be telecommunications and avionics. So I've done projects in all other industries and have a very extensive portfolio. But at the end of the day, I'm looking to transform from project controls into more, as I say, public speaking and more opportunities that are going to give me, as I said earlier, a voice of reasoning to be able to impact. So, there's a lot of great things coming on. We can talk about those here in a few minutes, but, I've got platforms that we're developing. We've got things that are happening with our podcasts. We're bringing forth teams to basically kind of channel some of the things that we need to change from a legislative standpoint as we deal with cancer, primarily like the financial toxicity that people go through. I mean, it's just so many things that are happening right now. I'm using all the skills that I've developed in project controls It may not be directly related to project controls as being a consultant, but certainly I am moving the needle. I'm becoming a disruptor in a lot of areas that people would say, well, Greg, you've changed careers again. And I can name all the 10 times that I have changed careers throughout my career.
Very good. Amazing. I will ask more questions about the balance that you have
Sure.
between the professional life and the personal and your interest, like the purpose-driven sort of interest. Now, let's just go back again to the lessons learned. You mentioned the biggest lesson was, or what you learned was patience. What other lessons have you learned during this process, and that now you are kind of using them to look into future and also work toward those objectives that you have for future?
Yeah, I think the other one is, resiliency, because, at the end of the day, when you are diagnosed or you go through anything that requires you, as I would say, a setback, you've got to figure out, and determine in your mindset, how do you get through it? So sometimes people say, I just don't have the strength, I don't have the courage, or, I don't have the knowledge to be able to do that. So for my wife and I, the first thing that we had to do is basically educate ourselves. And we went off and, for lack of better terms, and I hope none of my doctors are listening to this, we dove into the details. We became PhDs, in the diagnosis and treatments of multiple myeloma, because in order to have the resiliency and the fortitude to ensure that you could advocate for yourself, you've got to be educated enough to be able to talk the lingo, to be able to understand, the principles, the philosophies, and all the things that are going on behind the science. And of course, a lot of my doctors, as they very well know, I was a challenging patient because I think very logically. I'm very goal-oriented. I'm passionate about the things that I do. And when it comes to my life, well, those things get amplified probably by 1,000x. And so, resiliency is something that became another lesson, that my wife and I, endured, as along with perseverance and a few others. But certainly those are kind of the top three that we really honed in on, because we knew that at the end of this, I wanted to have the longest possible survivalship that I could have as far as the quality of life post multiple myeloma.
Very, very good, Gregory. Now, before I go to my next question, there are a couple of questions here that are related to the support, right? So one part of this support is the family members, right? So as a cancer patient, you've gone through this process and you have family members, right? So this is emotional roller coaster for both sides, for you as the patient and for the family members. What kind of advice you have for the family member and the support that they should provide? What sort of support do you think a cancer patient requires for family members to provide? And on the other hand, this emotional roller coaster for the patient themselves. What is your suggestion for a cancer patient to deal with this emotional roller coaster, right? With the news that they receive. One day good news, another day not so good news. What sort of advice you have for them to be able to handle these sort of news?
Well, let me take your first question first, and I'm going to be very open and honest with everyone that's listening to this. As a family member, as a friend, as a supporter, the first thing you have to be prepared to do is you have to check in to the individual's life. A cancer patient experiences the most devastating news in hearing that you are diagnosed with cancer. And going into that diagnosis, you don't want your friends and your family to check out of your life. I've lost a tremendous amount of people that I thought were very close, that were very sincere, that were going to be in my court. And, when I finally got to talk with them, they basically just said, I didn't know what to say to you. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know, what I could do to help you out. Well, to me, it's very, very simple. If you're a family member or a friend or anything like that. And that's why I said you need to check into that individual's life. The simple aspect of going forward when someone's diagnosed with cancer is the simple fallacy of, how are you doing? You know, because at the end of the day, we want to know as cancer patients is that you are there. You may not have the words, you may not have the courage or the verbiage to basically, you know, lift our spirits, but we need for you to be there. Be in the moment. Check in to life, you know, with the cancer patient, because the hurdles, the tribulations, the challenges, all of these things, you know, like I said earlier, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, you name it all goes through us, in and out of us, just like, you know, the autobahn. You know, I mean, you know, it's crazy, you know, what we go through as a cancer patient to try and regain our quality of life. And so for those family members, that's my advice. Check in to the patient's life. And even if you can't, be on ready. They need something. Okay, a case of water. They need, you know, for you to run to the store. They need for you to take care of whatever the situation may be. Check in. Check into that person's life. Now, for the cancer patient themselves, and I know this from heart, that that road overall is never, never, never easy. And for me, because of my background and what I've learned through project controls, you've got to humble yourself and you have to find the standards that you believe in. You know, for me, a lot of people go, well, Greg, what kind of made you, you know, advance yourself from where you were to where you are right now? And I'm going to open up the door on this and just basically be very transparent. Is for many, many years before cancer, I had lost my faith. You know, I had lost my ambition, my lust for ensuring that, you know, I always had my connection to the higher power. And so I began to seek out a church, which we found here in San Antonio. You know, I began to re-nourish my spirit, re-nourish my soul, get my standards of who I am internally back in order and my beliefs back in order, so that I could basically move forward in the storm with the stability that was needed to basically weather the storm and come out successfully on the other end.
Very, very well said. Thank you very much, Gregory, from both sides, really. And that's very nice. Also, the Lauren Lively said, I just want to highlight her comment. Some people are just afraid. They don't know what to say. Asking how someone is doing doesn't take a lot of effort, but it
That's
means
right.
a lot. And also, she mentions that just be there, right? So just
That's
be
right.
there for them, however you can.
That's
So
right.
it doesn't really require a lot of effort, and understanding what they're going through with, just as you said, it's just how are you doing, with
That's
a
right.
simple
That's right.
question that means a lot to them, that you care. So showing that we care is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Very much thank you very much, Gregory. Now let's just go to the last part of our conversation. Greg, you had a post on LinkedIn that you asked a question. The question was really simple: do you have a place? And when I looked at that, I thought about it, and in my mind, the interpretation of that: do you have a purpose? Do you have something that you kind of belong to? What do you mean by do you have a place? And what is your advice for people when you ask them this question, how they should really look into their life and answer the question?
You know, Cameron, I'm going to be honest with you. You know, a lot of my posts that I put out there, they were like therapy for me for the moment and time that I was enduring through the cancer battle. And I do recall that post because it was very thought provocative with regards to, you know, the question. And so for me, as I said earlier, I had lost my faith and there were other things that had transpired in my life during that time, you know, plus dealing with cancer. You know, here I am, you know, I'm sitting on the edge of the bed and I'm crying, you know, it's late at night, you know, everyone's asleep and I'm the only one up. And, you know, these thoughts of energy, of, you know, exhilarating, you know, sorrow, depression are all flowing through my body at one time. And, I'm asking myself, do I know my place? Do I understand my purpose? Do I understand what my walk of life should be in order for me to thrive, in order for me to have happiness, in order for me to have joy and peace of mind? Do I understand my place? And as I was asking myself that question, I look back at my past history in having a very successful and illustrious career and realize that, was I truly happy, in the things that I was doing? Or was I giving too much? Was I sacrificing too much at that moment in time in my life? And I realized that I didn't put a lot of things on the priority list that should have been on the priority list, because I was always traveling. I was always on the go, dealing with multiple projects kind of simultaneously. And at that moment in time, in asking myself that question, I said, I need to move forward so that no one steals my joy. I need to move forward understanding what my purpose is. I need to move forward understanding that I'm going to provide inspiration and impact and empathy and kindness and show compassion towards those around me that I love, friends and family, to ensure that they know that I care. And so I just got it into my mind at that point in time that I've got to do better. Because if you don't understand your purpose, then what good is living? You have to know which direction you're traveling. And so everything that I'm doing nowadays with the whole transformation that's going on in my life, that's the direction that it's heading. And, there's big things getting ready to come.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much, and very inspiring, especially that feeling of happiness, the joy inside, that many times I would say is missing because we focus a lot on the work and not much about other things that excite us. So my question here is that when you kind of reflect back, and I'm sure you've seen others as well, many people are very, I would say not workaholic, I wouldn't say that, but they are focused a lot on the professional side, uh, developing, growing their career, and they may get to the top of the mountain. But then they look back or look around them and they see that something missing. In your mind, based on the experience that you've had from before cancer with your professional career to now after that you're kind of balancing things, what is missing for many people that are focused only on their job and what they're doing, and they miss a lot of other things? What is that thing, the missing thing that you can point out here?
Well, I'm not going to cause criticism to others, but I know from my own standpoint, what you just said, being a workaholic and really putting others, particularly like projects, on the forefront of growth and the forefront of monetization, profitability, those type of things were always driving entities. But, as I step back, I have to say, does that leave you fulfilled? Because fulfillment requires a sense of not only happiness, but joy and peace of mind. Do you look in the mirror every day, and this is kind of, I'm going to flip this around a little bit. Do you look at the mirror? Do you look in the mirror every day and understand that as you see the individual in the mirror, that you ask them, the question of, are you living your fullest life? Are you living out your dreams? Are you happy? Are you content? I mean, these are things when you start to really peel back the layers of people, and help them understand, the importance of vulnerability and transparency and being authentic and kind of taking away the mirage that we see out there in the world. And a lot of people hate that about me because I won't say hate, but a lot of people dislike that about me. It's because, I make it my sole purpose not to hide behind a disguise. What you see is what you get. And for me, it's always, going to be my original self. I'm not going to show a moment or post a moment that certainly that I feel is a false pretense of who I am as an individual. And so I live in the moment right now because of the significant contributions of ensuring that everything that I do, if it can help one person, then I've done my job. And of course, at this point in time in my life, I've literally helped thousands from sharing my story across all of my social media platforms. And like I said, I'm just getting started.
Yeah, and then remember, when I compare your version right now versus 2 years ago, I think we had you and we had conversation. We had you also in our summit. I see a different vibe and energy from you compared to the past. So I'm kind of saying that you are really living the purpose. Now, a question Shore is asking, how are you feeling now? Are you fully recovered?
Wow. Well, let me just go back and tell everybody, based on medical terminology and medical speak, multiple myeloma is what they call an incurable disease. And so technically, how I feel today, I feel great. I have my good days, I have my bad days. My wife and I, we're walking and we're exercising and doing the things that are important to keep me in balance. But certainly, you know, I have the concern sometimes in the back of my mind is that, I could go into a relapse. But do I believe that that's ever going to happen? No, because, I pray about it every day and I keep my faith in God and ensure that I'm doing the right things, not only mentally, physically, nutrition, diet, so forth and so on, to ensure that nothing goes in my body or that I'm exposed to anything that I shouldn't be exposed to. But, overall, the recovery is going pretty well. Like I said, to be where I am today, I am far by, much further along than others that I know in the multiple myeloma community. And like I said, it's nothing shy of a miracle. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much, Gregory. I have a couple of questions, but before that, I want to ask our listeners, those who are watching this conversation, please type in the comment box one thing, like one main thing that you have learned from conversation today, right? So I'm seeing that some have shared already, but just right now, type in the comment what have you learned from this conversation. Now, I just wanted also to read a couple of comments here. Angela saying that thank you for sharing your story. Your honesty sounds like, sorry, I cannot read that. So your honesty and the awakening, it sounds like you've had very powerful story. And then Lauren is saying that, yes, life is too short. Live in the moment, do the best you can do each day, which is really, really important. And then Marcel saying, thanks for this inspiring story. What a great mindset you have, which is really true and great. And then I see, let me see here. There is a Facebook user. I have to see what message is here. Anyway, so I cannot show. Then I see a Facebook user saying awesome interview. I don't see the name. And that's the lesson that Marcel has learned. Be true to yourself. So very, very good point. Any other lessons that you have learned, please share with us in the comment area. Now, a couple of last questions for you, Gregory. Let me see where, yeah, this one I have to remove. So what advice do you have for those who are in project controls, right? So another question that was in also the questions was that if you could go back several years ago, what would you do differently now that you have this realization? And what advice do you have for those who are really focusing on project after project, traveling, all that you mentioned, whether they have their own business or they are working in corporate? What advice do you have for those?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is, certainly I'm never going to discount anybody for their hustle or, trying to aspire to achieve their dreams, because I think that's significant. That shows the integrity of the individual, that, their willingness and determination to get out there and do whatever it takes, whether it be project after project after project. Those things require a level of resiliency that far by exceeds, people that may not endure or may not enjoy all of the rigor that you have to go through, working on multiple projects, particularly if they're very complex, if they're very technically engineering savvy. These things are very, very hard. Project controls has always been the back plane. They've been the shadow of the cloud. They've been the fortune teller. There's a lot of cliches that are out there. But the best advice I can give to any project controls person, and trust me when I say this, is understand your craft. And what I mean by is understand your job. Be the best that you can be in your job, but don't let your job become the person that you want to be. And so, simply put, is the fact that you can chase all of the projects, you can get your name and your repertoire out there, you can grow your business in a lot of different verticals. But at the end of the day, the value that you put in yourself and the value and the time that you take out for your family and the value and time that you take out for a mental recharge, you can't overlook those things. And when I say that, is because I know that from my own personal experience, working 12 years straight, not taking a vacation, doing things that, no one else would take on. It doesn't pay off. It doesn't pay off. And so find those moments in time that reap the benefits, from the sacrifice and the reward that you have already given to someone else. Enjoy it. Smell the air.
Very, very insightful and inspiring. Really great advice that you have for us all, because we shouldn't really just focus on doing and let the job defines us, as you said. So we have to really define what we want to do and be happy and joyful about that. Very, very good. Last question that I wanted to ask, and Marcel asked. That's why, Marcel, I didn't ask your question when you asked it. What are your plans for future? I think you talked a little bit about that. What is next for you, Greg? Do you want to still continue in the role? But you also mentioned that you want to look at other aspects. What is the future? How does the future look like for you?
Well, I mean, it's quite emotional to even think about this. But my future right now is really to continue on the trajectory that I'm on. Because I love inspiring people. I love taking my pain, my trauma, my resiliency, transforming that into something so positive that people can gravitate towards. And, the best reward for me is understanding when people say, Greg, I appreciate reading what you posted out there. It helped me think about things differently. It helped lift me when I was in a bad place and time in my life. That's rewarding to me, like I said, as a part of giving back. Earlier, I mentioned that, I'm tied in very closely with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. I will continue to work with them very, very closely. Some of the most impactful things that I'm getting ready to do in my life outside of all of my business ventures and things that are going on is I'm in the process of working on my book, which is called Faith, Strength, and Courage. And it's basically going to be focused in on overlooking your fears and starting to believe. And so, we are working very diligently behind the scenes right now to basically put you into my life, put you into what transpired from the time that I heard the cancer diagnosis, the roller coaster, the up, the down, everything that I dealt with, just so that anyone that reads that material can understand just how important life is, and you can never take it for granted.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gregory. Everyone is sending messages that as Joel Martinez, he's in project controls. I think I needed to hear that. Thank you. And then Lauren says, preach, Gregory. And also Facebook user, your faith journey has inspired me to keep pushing through. That's really one of those people I'm sure that you're helping with your story, and also the book. Definitely when you have the book, that is going to also help many people. So definitely you are on the right purpose, no matter what happens next, right? So you are doing it in the moment. So that's really what it means to be a believer, to have faith. Just believe that this is the right thing to do, and you're doing it. And also, Sona mentioned believe in yourself. That is a lesson learned. Marcel, wow, great lesson. Faith, strength, and courage. That's another thing learned. And finally, I have Angela saying that overlook your fears and start to believe. It seems that the theme really is about the faith and belief, in yourself and in the higher power. No matter what you call that higher power, believe in that and let go of anything that brings you down. So, as Gregory mentioned, enjoy the process. Do not just focus on the job. Don't let your job define you, and then do your best and be on purpose, right? So lots of great lessons. I cannot really mention all of that, but Gregory, really, really great session, very insightful, and we are glad that we have you here. And this was the last question that I had. The final thing I wanted to say before you leave is that how people can get in touch with you. Is it LinkedIn? Is it a website? How can they connect with you to maybe follow you and learn more?
Well, certainly, I'm not an individual at this point in time who, what I say, at least probably 3 or 4 years ago, I shied away from social media. I wasn't a major component of social media, but I'm very transparent. And for those that are looking to find me, certainly LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn probably daily. Gregory O. Proctor on LinkedIn. Certainly, if you're interested in any of my businesses, such as Cut to the Chase podcast, that is K2TCpodcast.com. If you're interested in my mobile app company, which is called TrueSpot, that is TrueSpotAR.com. If you're interested in my project management business, that is SchXer, SchXer.com. But overall, I mean, I think to keep it all simple, if you just send me a DM, if you're looking for me to be on the show, if you're looking for me to talk, if you're looking just to gain more insight, more perspective about me, or, I'm a great listener, I think that I find myself listening to people, quite well, and certainly offering them, my advice, seeing that I've gone through a lot of, tumultuous things in my life. But certainly, I'm an open book. I don't have anything to hide. And at the end of the day, I think that's the way we should all try to live our lives, in a way that provides a very sincere, quality, wholesome way to ensure that people can unite on the forefront of being able to change and impact the things that are going on in the world today.
Beautifully said. Thank you very much, Gregory. Everyone, you know now how to find Gregory. He's very also fast in response when I contacted him about this session. So a message on LinkedIn if you want to ask any specific question, he'll be there and answer. And he has also the podcast, right? So Cut to the Chase podcast as well. That is really also, what is the podcast about? Is it like interview you or just yourself?
Yeah, so the podcast has always been based on friends, family, professional colleagues talking about things that impact our ability to thrive. And basically, we talk about motivational, inspirational challenges and triumphs. We don't interview anybody that's like, Fortune 500, millionaires, gazillionaires, billionaires. We talk to everyday people because at the end of the day, I find that everyday people have stories that are so impactful that can elevate our spirits and bring about a joy that we can learn from. And so we really focus in on that. At the moment in time before the podcast, before I was diagnosed with cancer, we had about 450 people waiting to be on our podcast. So I don't know what that number is right now, but we're getting ready to start that back up. I'm pretty excited about it, as you can tell. And it's just another, endeavor that fulfills my joy.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. You are definitely on the right track, and Gregory, with what you are doing right now and the balance that you are creating. And I'm sure that you're going to impact a lot of lives, even more than what you're doing today. And that's what the living is about. Thank you very much, Gregory. Everyone, thank you very much for showing up and being there with us in this live stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. And I think Gregory also put it on his Facebook. So thank you very much, whoever could attend, the recording will be available. Anyone that wants to share it, let us know. It's going to be on our LinkedIn page. With that, thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you very much again, Gregory, for great insights and inspiring
Thank you.
Story.
Thank you.